and they sort of represent Satan and God, if you will. And some have suggested that Yahweh, the being that is Yahweh, according to the Sumerians, was the one that actually created humanity, genetically altering whatever. And then the other God wanted to help them ascend into beings like them.
Right.
But then Yahweh didn't want that to happen. And so, again, it's painted as this sort of, the one that gave them knowledge was the good guy. And
right.
It's very interesting because it's almost like Satan beat, not truly, but sort of tried to instill into culture his story, his side of the story, if you will, earlier than God. But, God used a much better method because he used 40 people over a span of 1,500 years, in like 3 different languages and all this stuff, and wrote history before it happens. I mean, there's all that stuff there that's just better proof, in my opinion, than just Sumerian tablets or anything. But let's get
what were we talking about? We were talking about time travel
John
stuff.
Titor.
Okay.
And something that I will say, just because we're in that biblical realm right now, the person who brought this up was Gary Stearman of Prophecy in the News. He wrote a book called Time Travelers of the Bible.
Right.
And I have not read the book, but I've listened to some of the things he's talked about, listened to his talk at Branson and things like that. And one of the just interesting points is this idea that there are time travelers in the Bible. And whether that is true or not, I don't know. But here's some of the, I guess, evidence, if you will. One of the characters, Elijah, which we see a lot in 1st and 2nd Kings in the Old Testament, he doesn't die. He's one of those guys that doesn't die, along with Enoch. He walks with God. He's taken up by a whirlwind. He just disappears. Right. The next time we see him is in Matthew 17:3, when Jesus gets transfigured on the mountain in front of 3 disciples, and the disciples look up and boom, there's Moses and Elijah talking with Jesus. Right. And so Gary Stearman theorizes like, hey, maybe Elijah was traveled through time. Like maybe he got in that whirlwind and boom, he popped out with Jesus to check out because this is right before Jesus, goes to the cross and everything. Right. And so, what if? And I think it's a really compelling thing to think about, because just that little tidbit there shows that, hey, you know what? God is actually the one in control of time. Right. If he wanted us to travel through time, I am pretty sure that he can make it happen, but it's not for everyone. I don't think, just from a purely psychological standpoint, I don't think people would be able to handle, as cool as it sounds and whatever, with time travel, I don't think it would be the, Back to the Future, great Scott, like getting things back in order.
And as disappointed as I am to agree with you, I sort of do. John Titor even talks about how in 2036 there are still people who don't believe in time travel. I mean, time travel has now been militarized as being used by the government. He on the John Titor website, you can see a rendering of, the temporal recon unit patch that he has,
which looks really, really scampy. Like
it is a pretty
if there really was a logo from 2036, I would expect some. I mean, I don't know.
Well, let's talk about his culture here in a second.
Right. Because that's
it sort of makes sense.
I did think about that when I saw it, and it made sense to some regard. But
it sort of makes sense. But anyways, John Titor even talks about how in 2036, and here I am talking about him like he's real again. But
that's what we do here.
That's what we do here. Yeah. He talks about how people still don't really believe in time travel, and it's been militarized and it's used and it's a normal thing. His time machine is made by GE. General Electric makes time machines in 2036 in his world line. And not only that, but it's it's not a machine like you get inside of it. That's not what it is. It's a box type. Well, more or less, it's a box that you put the box inside of like a car or something like that.
Right.
And then the box transports the car and you into like to wherever you're going. Now the box generates a gravity field which sort of engulfs the car, and sort of, actually it's kind of funny, he talks about how the gravity field picks up some of the earth below the car and transports that back in time too. So you sort of have this car going through time with like a lump of dirt beneath it or something like that. It's really wacky. And saying it out loud, when I'm reading it, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, okay. But now I'm saying it out loud. It's like, that is the wackiest thing I've ever heard. Like, and he's talking about how he came back in a 1967 Chevrolet.
That's right.
So, okay, guys, okay. A 1967 Chevrolet, the dirt still underneath it is traveling through time and space, across parallel dimensions. I mean, I'm thinking I'm crazy for ever even considering
We're
this.
crazy for bringing this up on a show, apparently.
I just took the time to picture that in my mind right now, and now it's just this is awesome. I need to go get a 19. It's like, why not why did we choose a DeLorean? Why not a 1967 Chevrolet? Anyways,
DeLoreans look cooler.
Well, that's arguable, but
especially when they fly through the air.
Yeah, with dirt
with
still
trash
beneath it. Yeah, being fed by trash.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyways, what we were talking about,
the culture of 2036, according to John Titor.
Right. Okay, and it's interesting because it sounds like its own sort of type of utopia. It actually sounds kind of great. What it is this is post a World War III. And everything's sort of gone backwards. They talk about how John Titor talks about how everything is much more community based. Everything he keeps talking about how my favorite thing is to hug my family. My favorite thing is to be with my family. My favorite thing about the future is to be with me. It's very much family and community focused, which sounds good. I mean, that's wonderful. He talks about how it's much more akin to like farm life. Like everybody's working for the community. He says his job was like picking oranges or something, and shipping them on a sailboat up some river in Florida. I mean, it seems like this very I think I've mentioned it before, and Gons, I've showed you this, which is an animated series by Tom Hanks, and it's called Electric City. Right. And it's sort of a post-apocalyptic sort of thing. But you guys can check it out. It's Electric City, Tom Hanks's Electric City. And that really seems kind of what the 2036 John Titor future reality kind of seems like, almost like a step backwards, although certain technologies still exist. He talks about how doctors people aren't really concerned with healthcare as much. He talks about how if you get a really bad disease,
you just die.
That's just what you do, and you accept it. Like, you're like, oh, I got this disease, it's my time to die, and you die. And he talks about how doctors are much more focused on things more like I think the words he uses is it's much more like the Old West doctors. Right. Where it's more about fixing broken arms or delivering babies or things like that. It's not so much about like brain research and things like that. He says there are genetic, they do grow organs. There are genetic cures for things. Cancer and AIDS are still not completely curable. Just stuff like that.
Right.
It's a very interesting picture that he paints, which gives a whole new aspect to his believability.
Right.
It's just not what you would expect from a
The
time
future,
travel.
yeah.
The future, exactly. It almost is completely counter to what you and I talk about.
Right. Yeah, no, it is. Let me read something that he posted in February 8th of 2001.